Okay, so we're going to start on Proof Act 2, Scene 1. So the first scene opens 4 years earlier and is actually referred to in Act 1 on page 39. And the thing for you to realize is that what we are watching in this scene is not Catherine's memory, it's an authentic scene that David Auburn has written and included in the play. So it's more of like a real flashback to kind of give the audience um, the history and background into some of the issues that were discussed in the previous act. Okay, things like why is it that Cathy didn't go to school? What was Robert really like? Remember how we were questioning how much of what she remembers Robert as, how much of that is actually authentic, and how much of it is stuff that she's made up on her own. Okay, right. So it's quite clear in this scene that Robert is in one of his remissions. He's not exactly ill at this point in time, and this is quite clear from when Catherine says he's been doing really well for almost 7 months. So because he's been doing well, it's at this point in time, 4 years ago, that she decides maybe it's possible for her to continue her education and lead a normal life. So she tells him that she's going to go to school, and as soon as she makes that announcement, right, there is an awkward beat. This is significant because prior to this, when the scene opens, they're having a really nice conversation, making dinner plans and so on. And as soon as she brings this up, right, the audience realizes this is a sensitive issue. Something's going to happen, right? And true enough, we need to look at Robert's reaction because he doesn't react very well to her news. Okay, so how does Robert react to Kathy's news? Very simply, he raises several objections to her plan of going back to school. His first objection was the distance, right? Why does she have to go all the way to Northwestern when Chicago is right around the corner? And Kathy's reasoning is the fact that she doesn't want to go to a university where her father is pretty much the Superman of mathematics. The next objection he raises is about money. And again, she justifies it by explaining how she's on a scholarship and Claire has also offered to provide her with whatever additional income she might need. And then he decides, okay, so the first two objections didn't work. Let's question her ability. So he says, Kathy, do you think you can cope? After all, you haven't been in touch or you haven't been in school for such a long time, and it's no joke. I mean, you want to go to do your degree in maths, you have to make sure they can keep up with it, right? And when that doesn't pan out as well, finally he reveals that he's just really angry that she didn't talk to him about it before she decided on it. Okay, and it's quite clear he is not very happy about relinquishing control over her life. And when she explains, right, that the reason why she didn't quite speak to him about it was because she wasn't sure as to how well he was doing, how his mental capabilities were, he flares up at her, he gets defensive as usual, and he says, so am I supposed to be honored that, you have decided to tell me this now? So very quickly you see how from a pleasant conversation about dinner, things turn to be one where the atmosphere is quite intense, right? They're having an argument. And soon enough, Hal enters the scene. And what is the significance of Hal entering the scene? So obviously it's for plot development. We know that he first met Kathy and got to know her like 4 years ago, and he was Robert's student. But what's more interesting to note is the fact that how Robert treats him, how he speaks to him, right? So, for instance, he passes this comment and he says, as he approaches the completion of his dissertation, time approaches infinity. So, that's not a very nice comment to make. It kind of reveals how Robert is mocking Hal. Whether it's a genuine sense of mocking or he's doing it out of a sense of good humor, um, it's not quite clear. But I think, his next comment when he says wrong, if it feels done, there are major errors. I mean, you put these two remarks together, and you kind of get the impression that Robert is quite an arrogant man. He's quite conceited. He treats his student as um, a second-class citizen who's not quite good enough, and only Robert knows everything there is to know where mathematics is concerned, and what could Hal possibly know. So he really treats Hal like a little junior student who knows nothing about mathematics. And I think this is not this is not the kind of loving, um, nurturing father figure that we saw of Robert based on Catherine's memories in Act One, right? Um, the next significant thing about this scene is Robert and Normalcy. So Hal actually asks Robert, "So are you working on anything at this point in time?" And then there's a rather awkward admission from Robert when he says, "Nothing, beat, nothing at the moment." So this line is very significant because, I mean, the great Robert is currently not on any kind of a project. He's doing nothing. So and we know that this is because he's sane. Remember how we talked about, genius requires that element of insanity in order for him to enter the dimension of mathematics and figure out all the amazing puzzles. So right now he's sane for 7 months. And because he's sane, he's not capable of working on anything. So the beat, however, is it reinforces, perhaps Robert's unhappiness and his need to justify it by saying nothing at the moment. So he says, this is a temporary state. It's not as if I am never going to work on anything. It's just a momentary pause. Or it could be him saying that I can't run away from my insanity and my genius. It will come back to me. So this is just a temporary breather for me. So either way, he's admitting that his state of normalcy is not going to be permanent. Another possibility is, do you think he's saying this so that he won't lose Cathy, so that Cathy will remain behind and not leave him to go away to Northwestern University? Um, at the end of page 56 and continuing on to page 57, he also delivers a pretty long monologue on what is it like to lead a normal life. Um, okay, throughout this play, you realize how David Auburn, he his writing style is such that the dialogue is very short and it's very fast paced, like a normal conversation. He does not indulge in long monologues, unlike Arthur Miller. But this is a rare instance where he actually does provide a character with a long monologue. And if we are to actually look at this long monologue that Robert delivers about what is it like to be normal, you see how it's almost as if he's trying to convince Cathy and Hal, and perhaps himself, that he can appreciate the normal, mundane beauty of life, like the sky and the wind and the general cityscape around him, right? And he also seems to show some kind of a um, indulgence, some kind of a fondness for the students around him at the university campus and how they're browsing and going through their day to day life. But at the same time, if you notice his choice of words, things like you'd call it loitering. I mean, no one called it loitering. He is referring to them as loitering himself. And he also says it's an honest way to kill an afternoon. It's quite clear he's trying to imply, without saying it directly, how these students are like wasting their time going about their normal, mundane lives. And he finishes off his monologue by saying, maybe you find something great, like an old thriller with a painted cover from the 40s, or a textbook one of your professors used when he was a student. He's trying to talk about if you don't pursue something and you continue, so called loitering around, then there's this lack of a purpose driven um, quest, right? And he finally finishes off his monologue by saying what kind of ideas they'll come up with when they settle down and get to work. So, my sense is it's not so much him appreciating the normalcy, it's about him expressing a sense of disdain for it. Unfortunately, I think another possible outcome of his monologue is the fact that if you notice immediately after this, he suddenly switches to become more supportive of Catherine's decision to go away and take her degree. Okay, but before we go on to that, let's just go back a few steps back to the top of page 56, right? So Hal, um, when he finds out that Kathy's going away, he expresses his well wishes. Hal says, sure, all the new people, new places, getting out of the house. And Catherine's reaction is one where she's embarrassed and then she says, yes. And then Hal realizes, what he said, unwittingly. He's kind of pointed out how she's been cooped up at home looking after her sick father, her brilliant father who has been ill, mentally unstable. And then Robert feels the need to reaffirm, this good thing that Cathy is doing for herself. And he says, absolutely, get me the hell out of here, thank God, right? But it doesn't quite sound very sincere. Immediately after that, he says, of course, maybe I want to have the place to myself for a while. Did that ever occur to you? And it's awful the way children sentimentalize their parents. It's quite clear he's trying to keep up an appearance of being glad that, Kathy's going to get a chance for herself, right? Um, and then he says, and if you get stuck with a problem, give me a call. Again, there's this indication, he just doesn't want to lose touch with the mathematics. Not that he doesn't want to lose touch with his daughter. So as long as she keeps him in her life by continuing to engage with him where the math is concerned, that's what he's most concerned about, right? And then that monologue that he delivers about the normalcy of life, and after that monologue, he says, maybe you pick up where I left off. So again, there's this need where he just seems to, his concern, his priority seems to be this need to have a protege worthy of his greatness, as opposed to his daughter's well-being, right? And he tries to like really drive this point home to her, and he says, don't underestimate yourself. I mean, look, you can disagree with me and you can say, look, I mean, maybe he's saying all these things out of genuine concern. As a father figure, he wants her to do well. That's possible. You're entitled to your opinion if you think that. But I think, at least in my opinion, when I put all these pieces together, it just seems to be a very clear picture of how he's so self absorbed when it comes to maths, his genius, his work, yet again. Okay, so that's just my opinion. Um, okay, one last point about this particular scene is in the midst of all of this, he then realizes that it's Kathy's birthday. And look at the way he wishes her happy birthday. He says, I'm sorry, I used to have a pretty good memory for numbers. Even the fact that he forgot her birthday, he needs to justify it with the fact that it's because currently he is not at his peak where his mathematical ability is concerned. It's got nothing to do about that father daughter relationship or bond. You don't need to be a genius to remember someone's birthday, right? But to him, everything goes back to his genius. I mean, if he's not in connection with his genius, with his maths, then everything falls apart for him. Okay, and his and the element of fakeness where he's wishing her happy birthday is reinforced when he steps at her and he says, whatever you want, goddammit, Catherine, it's your birthday. And then again, like an awkward beat. Like his fake attempt is made quite clear in that awkward beat. But still, the scene ends with him writing that diary entry, and this is the diary entry that Hal discovers and passes to Catherine in scene 1 when the play opens, where he actually writes about how appreciative he is for everything his daughter has done for him. So I suppose, yes, a large part of him is the maths professor, the maths genius. But I think conflicting with that genius is that humanity in him where he wants to be a father figure. So there is this constant swinging between the extremes of trying to be nice and then reverting back to his self-centered mathematical self. Okay, so that's pretty much what I have for you for um, scene 1.